With art, we've been able to help reestablish their identity, validate that who they are, and that they are more than this. They're not the disease. They're still there. It's just a matter of helping to bring that person out.
How would you describe what a patient with Alzheimer's looks like and acts, and what is sort of
Alzheimer's? It's unique to each person. There isn't a one-step process. It really is unique. Symptoms can appear 20 to 30 years before you actually start seeing it. What I love about the art therapy with persons with dementia is that particular Alzheimer's disease is there's such a stigma, and their brain cells are dying. It's progressive. It's not going to get better. Since research is we're looking for effective treatments, we're using art as a way to bring that person to help support their identity. There seems to be this loss of identity for themselves. Relationships are different now. You don't have husband and wife, daughter and mother. It's now caregiver or diagnosis. And so relationships change. People often tell me, that's not my mother. That's not who I grew up with. But that is your mother, and she's changed, but she's still the same person. So with art, we've been able to help reestablish their identity, validate that who they are, and that they are more than this. They're not the disease. They're still there. It's just a matter of helping to bring that person out. And it gives families something to talk about. Because families come in, they don't know what to say, but then they see the artwork, and most of the time, these individuals are creating memories from past vacations that they love, their families. It may just be a whole splot of purple, but without processing and asking, well, what does this color mean to you? And she's looking at it and she says, well, I see my husband in there, and it's good, and I see the park in my house. So you just write, you document it, and then the family comes and you share it, and half the time family members are just sobbing because they had no idea they still remembered. And it gives them something to talk about. Because if you look at people towards the end of life, I've worked with people from the early onset to when they passed, and they're still creating art. Even from the moment, I'll go in the next week and they're like, oh, Mrs. Smith died. Wow. But I just saw her last week. She just painted. What do you mean? So and then you see their brain at autopsy, and it's this hole because brain cells are dying. So you take out the brain and it's just this big hole, and it's massive shrinking. So for the stigma in science to say they're brain dead, there's nothing there, the art says otherwise.
Wow. So do people have an ability to create art for longer than they're able to verbalize thoughts?
Yes, I think so. I mean, art's universal.
It's interesting. I feel like the way that artists who are initially hesitant start to evolve in their artistic skill as they get more comfortable. But what changes do you see with someone who's dealing with dementia?
It progresses. What you typically see is, and I find this personally fascinating, you have MRIs and PET scans that you can see the shrinking in the brain. But then with the art, you literally see changes in the progression. You can almost track the stages of where that person might be. Somebody in the beginning stages will use full color and the full page. But then as they're progressing, it'll be less and less color. It won't be as much of use of the space. They're very limited or just very fragmented. They can no longer close circles or draw unified forms. I have a woman who was a dancer. She's a ballerina. This was in Manhattan. And she'd always come up to me and she'd say, I'm not an artist, I'm a dancer. I'm not a painter, I'm a dancer. And I'd say, well, paint yourself dancing. So in the beginning, and I worked with her for 3 years, in the beginning she had her full self with her little tutu in Illinois, where she's from. And as she progressed, it was interesting to see that she wasn't able to no longer even draw like a stick figure. Wow. It was more like it was almost like an animal kind of feature with very fragmented. She didn't even have she always had tutus on. She didn't have a tutu on it. So you can literally see the progression of what's happening up here visually.
And is discussing and talking about the work a big part of your practice?
It's a huge part of the practice. Because that's where those memories come. If I'm working with somebody that I don't know very well, I don't know their life story, so we'll get started, but I'll have to ask them, what do you think of when you see this? I don't challenge their memory, like, well, don't you remember going to your home? I don't say things, I'll say, what does this remind you of? And that's when they'll start just talking, and I write down everything that they say. And it's amazing that it's always a past memory that oftentimes family thought it was long gone, but now they painted it, they created it. So I document it even in fragmented language, because language will get fragmented as the disease progresses and it's very jumbled. There was a woman I worked with in the San Francisco Bay Area, late stages, who I didn't know her very well, but I was managing to capture a few words. Coyote Estates, Beverly, few words here and there, and I just wrote it down. And then when I met with her husband, he just started crying. And I asked if he's okay, and he said, Coyote Estates is where we live. That's where we lived for 50 years. Beverly is her best friend. So even though she was very, very progressed and fragmented, I was still able to show pieces. And then the more that he stared at it and he was kind of looking at it, he realized she was actually painting her subdivision. He's like, I can see this now. He was kind of mapping it out. So it's fascinating. Yeah. It really is. You're capturing their memories, you're capturing their personhood.
So would you say memory and identity are two of the main sort of things that you're looking for?
It is. The idea of memory and identity fascinates me. Are memories responsible for our identity? So I'm just interested, or are we more than that? Yeah. And I tend to think we are.